Hey everyone, it's May. Welcome to another episode of the May Lee Show. Glad to have you here. And happy Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. It is the entire month of May that we're celebrating. And if you are following me on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, you will have noticed that I'm trying to highlight different factoids about AAPI community, history, events, individuals that have contributed. It's a series that I'm calling Did You Know? Because as a lot of us know within the AAPI community, AAPI history and stories aren't often shared and certainly not taught in schools. So I figured that this would be an opportunity to share some interesting factoids and historical events. So follow that on Instagram. So that's how I've been trying to celebrate this month. But as we all know, the challenges continue. The anti-Asian hate crimes and assaults continue on a daily basis. We're hearing about these hideous attacks against the elderly. Again, two elderly women attacked and stabbed at a bus stop. An older man attacked while he was collecting cans in New York and stomped on. An Asian father with his 1-year-old was attacked in front of a store. It goes on, and it's exhausting. It's tiring, it's frustrating, it's maddening, it's everything, right? And I know we're all feeling this, but it is important to keep speaking up and speaking out, to keep pushing back and making sure that this isn't being dismissed and that this isn't being treated as not a big deal and not a crisis. And especially, I don't want people to become so desensitized to this crisis of anti-Asian hate that it starts becoming not a big deal. Because you're already seeing mainstream media not really talking about this issue anymore. After the Atlanta shootings, that was the height, and now, back to business as usual. So it is up to us to continue talking about this, to continue pushing, to continue protesting, to continue demanding that things change, on the policing front, investigation front, social work, all of that, education for sure. So one thing that I saw recently that I really loved, and I'm so glad that they produced this, is a PSA by Advancing Justice LA, and it's bystander intervention. It is a beautifully illustrated PSA by award-winning artist James Yang, and then narrated by actor Ken Jeong. It's 90 seconds, and we're going to show it to you in a second. And you'll be able to listen to it if you're listening on via podcast. But what broke my heart when I first saw this, and then I've repeatedly watched this, and it continues to break my heart. It starts off with an animation of this elderly Asian woman pushing a grocery cart, a little like shopping cart. And it's such a simple illustration, but you see the look of sheer worry and anxiety on her face as she's walking down the street before she's harassed. And it just captivates and captures so powerfully the fear that the Asian community is living under right now, especially the elderly. So let's take a look at this PSA right now. Here it is.
Since the COVID-19 pandemic, Asian Americans have faced an alarming rise in hate incidents. Many of the victims are also some of the most vulnerable and defenseless. So what can you do to help? One way is through bystander intervention, a set of tools that can prevent verbal harassment from escalating into violence. Here are the 5 Ds of bystander intervention. Number 1, distract. Take an indirect approach. Start a conversation with the aggressor or draw attention away from the victim. Number 2, delegate. Get help from somebody else. Find a person in a position of authority nearby and ask them for assistance. Number 3, delay. After the incident is over, check in with the victim. Ask if they're all right or if they need you to take them somewhere. Number 4, direct. After assessing your safety, speak up. Tell the aggressor to leave the victim alone in a firm and clear voice. Number 5, document. Record a video of the incident at a safe distance. Film signs or landmarks to identify the location and say the date and time. Make sure you have the victim's permission before posting any footage online. We all play a role in keeping our community safe. Let's start today. Learn more at advancingjustice.org.
Yeah, so well done. So thank you to Advancing Justice LA and to James Yang, the artist, and Ken Jeong, who narrated that PSA. Hopefully people will watch it and pay attention and learn something from it and realize that they cannot just stand by and do nothing. All right. That goes for all of us. Now, this episode is about a new survey that has just been released by a new group, a nonprofit group called LAAUNCH. And LAAUNCH stands for Leading Asian Americans to Unite for Change. And this is a nonprofit group that came together. It was actually a group of friends, very accomplished, but they decided they had enough of seeing this anti-Asian hate, and they wanted to understand the perceptions of Asian Americans by others, right? Because their idea and what they realized was a lot of the research and the studies that have been taking place had to do with what the AAPI community thought about what was going on in the last year and a half with racism and xenophobia. So it was sort of their perceptions and ideas. But this is a study that really looks at the perceptions of Asian Americans by others to address the attitudes and the underlying causes of racism and discrimination. That's in their report. So this report is called STATUS, STAATUS Index, and that stands for Social Tracking of Asian Americans in the United States. And they say this is one of the first such studies in more than 20 years. The data and the results that they found are really fascinating. And I think, again, for me, it was so critical in understanding what people are still thinking about Asians. How do they see us, right? And these stereotypes that still exist. And the breakdown is pretty fascinating. So I invited one of the co-founders of LAAUNCH, Norman Chen, to come on and talk about this study and the findings and what they learned from this and what we can all learn from it and how this data can now be used to educate not just the AAPI community, but beyond, more importantly, so that there are these changes that take place in organizations, in schools, in companies, and government. And so yeah, I had a chance to talk to Norman, and here's that interview. Hi, Norman. Welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's get right into this incredible survey that you guys put out. But before we get to the data, some of which is really surprising and shocking, tell me first about LAAUNCH, what it's all about, and why you guys started this.
Yeah, so, we're a group of Asian Americans. We grew up primarily in the U.S. We went to schools here, we worked, and we went overseas for a long time. And a lot of us spent decades living and working in Asia. And during the 40 or 50 years since we grew up, and when we did experience some racism and aggressions as kids, we thought things were going to improve in the U.S. during our lifetimes. Yeah. And really disappointed and saddened to see that things have actually gotten worse.
Yeah.
And so last year, in the middle of the whole election buzz and with all the news that was going on about anti-Asian American sentiment, a group of close friends said we have to do something. We have to bring our resources, our skills, and try to make an impact. And so we're started last fall. Been working on some really cool projects and are really excited about the Status Index.
Yeah, so it was a group of friends, which I love that story, is that, and because I always talk about this on the show and on social media, is that sometimes when you see something, you got to do something as an individual. You don't have to be some huge leader or, be in politics or, be famous. So here's proof of that. You guys just decided there's a problem. So we're going to try to address it. So LAUNCH standing for Leading Asian Americans to Unite for Change. We should mention, we just chatted a little bit before we started this interview, that we actually did live in Hong Kong at the same time. So the exposure to Asia, but then coming back to America, I get it, because I grew up with that racism as a child growing up here. Then going to Asia is a very different experience, and then coming back, it's like a culture shock again.
It is. And it gives us a perspective, I think, because growing up in the East Coast, I'm not sure how proud I was to be, Asian American. And we had debates in Chinese school, which I was forced to attend. And I took the side of being pro-American versus pro-Chinese, because I thought there's so many more advantages to being part of the mainstream.
Yeah.
Like college, and then with experience living overseas, when you're part of the majority, it really changes your perspective and helps you understand, gosh, the power of being Asian and the pride we have in our culture. And so we come back with a little bit more attitude, I think, about our heritage and a little bit more pride, and yet still feeling very American. It's a great combination. So it
is. I mean, I always say we're lucky to have this dual identity.
That's right.
And the rich history of both cultures, that we have combined. So we have to look at it that way, instead of, again, when we were growing up, we looked at it as a disadvantage, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I always admit now when I give speeches and, on the show, that I wanted to be white when I was a young kid, because was the standard, Being Asian was a disadvantage. It was looked down upon. We were always the perpetual foreigner. So it is sad, like you're saying, that all of this is rearing its ugly head again, certainly in the last year and a half because of COVID. So you guys decided then to collect some real data and do these surveys that were, some of these questions were really interesting in terms of like getting the lay of the land on attitudes towards Asian Americans, and then also how Asian Americans felt about being here. So let's talk about, first of all, how you did this survey, and then let's talk about some of the data that you found. So first of all, how did you guys conduct the survey itself?
Yeah, so just in terms of backdrop for the survey, May, there's a lot of great research out there done by AAPI data, by Pew and other groups, but most research is focused on talking to Asian Americans about their experience in the U.S., and that's so important, especially during these difficult times. We also wanted to see how Asians were perceived by Americans more broadly. And that because we're part of America, right? And so looking at just a minority group in isolation is only part of the picture. Right. So when we went to go find research about how Asians are perceived by non-Asians, we found there was very little research out there. And a lot hasn't been done in the last 20 years. And the fundamental thesis is people are aware of the hate crimes, but now that we want to find solutions. What are the causes of these hate crimes?
Right.
The causes stem from stereotypes that lead to scapegoating, that lead to violence during times of crisis. And we have that exact situation now in America, where negative stereotypes about Asian Americans then were led to scapegoats about COVID, and then it came to violence. So stereotypes, as benign as they may seem, can ultimately become very dangerous. And so we wanted to do groundbreaking research about stereotypes, attitudes, and perceptions of Asian Americans.
And that's what I do find interesting about this survey. You're so right, Norman, that most surveys are done about just within the AAPI community, right?
That's right.
And so this one I really enjoyed, because it gives us a much clearer picture of how other people see us. And the existing stereotypes, like you're saying, are still so prominent and so strong across the board. And that's where we have to change that narrative, right? Because these stereotypes have been around for, 160, 200 years, as long as Asians have been here. So, okay, so let's talk about some of the data you found. So top findings. 8 out of 10 Asian Americans say they are discriminated against in the U.S. Well, that's not really that surprising, particularly because of what's been happening lately.
True. But, related to that is that 8 out of 10 Asian Americans say they don't feel respected in their, and so, yes, it's terrible. There's this discrimination, but, how hard is it to go through life and to not feel, at least an average level of respect to have 8 out of 10 say they actually do not feel respect in their own home country. That's really distressing. And we're seeing that in the Black American community as well, in the Hispanic American community as well. There is a massive racial crisis in the U.S., which people are becoming more and more aware of, and Asians suffer like many other groups.
Yeah, and what I also like about this report is that you talk about the African American community and Latinx, and other minority groups in the
Right.
way they feel about how they're treated, and how they're seen and how they're perceived. So that's pretty interesting to do that comparison, for
Yes.
sure.
It's systemic racism. We know
Yeah.
that, right? And there needs to be allyship between various groups to fight systemic racism. So we're highly collaborative, May. We really want to work with other groups. We've been supported and guided by groups like the ADL, who've been real pioneers in this space.
Yeah.
We've also are reaching out to other groups of color, people of color, communities of color, to collaborate and to form allyship. So yes, it's not just one group fighting the fight. It's got to be a collective effort.
Okay. Which is, we repeat that over and over again. Easier said than done, but we have to do it. There's power in numbers and solidarity, right? Okay, so sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. Even among Asian Americans, right? We always get this question, do you include South Asians or just East Asians? And you'll know, right? If you look at generations, our parents' generation, they tended to socialize more with people with their similar backgrounds, right?
Completely.
My parents hung out with Chinese Americans mostly.
Right.
Our generation, we have friends from a lot more different cultures, right? Japanese Americans, Korean Americans are good friends, Indian Americans as well. Our kids are almost colorblind sometimes. I mean, they just mix and mingle, and the last thing they'll tell me is a race for one of their friends. So
right.
There's much more interaction and socialization among different groups, and that's where we get our power. So we don't talk about how Hong Kong Chinese are different from Taiwanese Chinese from mainland Chinese, right? That's not going to get us anywhere. We talk about how Asians share so many core values and positions on healthcare, on immigration, on gun control, on human rights, on anti-hate crimes. And those are the things that bind us and give us power.
Right, right. And it is hopeful when you're suggesting that kids,
Yes.
they don't really see color or race. Unfortunately, some still do because they get it from their parents,
That's
it's
right.
passed on, but
Yeah.
it gives me hope to
does.
see that is changing, that the younger generation is starting to realize, who cares about color and race, right? So that's a great hopeful thing. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's go through some of this other data. I found respondents were most comfortable with an Asian as their doctor or nurse, friend or coworker, but less comfortable with an Asian American as their boss, son or daughter-in-law, or as the president of the United States. So clearly there is this division. And again, it's the stereotype, right? Oh yeah,
Right.
they're good doctors and they're trustworthy and all that stuff. But no. Leadership, no, we're not comfortable with that.
Exactly. I mean, overall, people are still very positive. That's one of the lessons we got from our study is there is a lot of positivity towards the Asian American community, and we want to celebrate that as well.
Yeah.
Hope that can improve over time. But yeah, there are slight differences, and we're seeing that, as friends, as neighbors, as workers, people overwhelmingly are familiar and comfortable with Asian Americans,
Right.
especially as doctors and nurses. We know the reputation for Asian Americans as caregivers.
Yeah.
But in terms of positions of authority, like a boss, like President of the United States, or more permanent positions like your son-in-law or your daughter-in-law, people are more are less comfortable,
Yeah.
and it's interesting. And I think it reflects just some lingering stereotypes and attitudes that are out there.
Yeah, and undertones of racism. Look, I think most people might say, "No, I'm not racist," but then if you give them a particular scenario, like, "Well, what if your daughter married somebody who was, a person of color?" Then they would be like, "Well," so that's always interesting to try to get that information out. And then I found it interesting when it came to the invisibility of Asians, even high profile. When you ask the question, can you name a high profile Asian American? Most people said, don't know, or they would just name Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, and the top female was Lucy Liu. And that was it.
How shocking is that? I mean, given how
crazy.
prominent Asian Americans have been in the news, the fact that most people, 42%, cannot name a single prominent Asian American is just sad.
Yeah.
And then the first one they name is Jackie Chan, whom we love, but who we know is a Hong Kong film star, right? He's not American. And the second, which we idolize, Bruce Lee, has been dead, passed away since 1973.
Right.
So it's really dated. It's really, it shows that despite all the progress we've made, we're still largely invisible in the US. And so, we're working with groups like Gold House, which are doing phenomenal work, as you know, in terms of trying to elevate the stature of Asian Americans in Hollywood and TV. And so a lot of work needs to be done on that. Our research has shown that TV, movies, and music are the number one or number two influencer of where people get their information about Asian Americans.
Sure.
Entertainment has a huge impact.
Yeah, and at least we are seeing progress in that area of entertainment. There's much more representation. There's more diversity. And now I think because of the last year and a half, because the spotlight has obviously been, on this issue of anti-Asian hate and the lack of education and awareness, we're starting to see this push.
Yes.
Which is great. Well, Norman, let me ask you then, having done this survey, what are sort of the more surprising or shocking data points for you that you saw resulting in the survey?
Yeah, so a few other ones that I'll talk about, May. We know that there's been a ton of press, right, in the past month or two, especially after the Atlanta killings, about these hate crimes towards Asian Americans. And in some sense, some of us who've been following feel like we've been inundated, right, with information. Yeah. Despite that, though, 37% of white Americans say they aren't aware of the increase in hate crimes and racism against Asian Americans over the past year. 37%, and 46% of Republicans. We're a nonpartisan group, but we just, share the facts and share the data that we get. Yeah. And the data is quite disturbing that such a high percentage of Americans are still not aware. So then it kind of brings to question, where are they getting their information from? Why is this not being disseminated to these people in these locations? And that leads to more research that needs to be done. But there is still a very acute problem of lack of awareness about these crimes, despite all the news that's been publicized. We laugh about it a little bit internally. We say, gosh, we really wish we had done this survey a month or so ago before the Atlanta killings, because then we would really low level of awareness. But we're still seeing such shockingly high levels of people who are not aware. So it just shows a lot of work still needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, Norman, I think the survey also showed that a lot of people, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but a number of people don't think this is a problem.
That's right.
Anti-Asian hate is not a problem. Not just the lack of awareness, but it's not a problem. That actually disturbed me even more.
A lot. So that's right. 24% of white Americans, 35% of Republicans say anti-Asian racism isn't a problem that should be addressed. And so, that's really concerning. And looking a little bit deeper at the data, May, because that one really, sparked our interest as well. A lot of it is from people who live in areas that don't have a lot of Asian Americans. So for them, they don't see the problem as much. They don't know the struggles of our community, right? They actually think Asian Americans are well respected. They don't know that's all this negativity that's happening to Asian Americans. And so history is really important. People need to understand the past challenges and scapegoating of Asian Americans, the lynchings in the past, the incarceration, all those important history points need to be made. And so hopefully with people who if people can gain more understanding about the struggles and history of Asian Americans, they'll have more empathy and they'll be more motivated to change.
You sound exactly like me. I mean, you took the words right out. That's what I've been saying repeatedly in every speaking engagement and presentation and on my show about the lack of education and AAPI history that isn't taught. So therefore, the general public has no clue as to what our community has been through over, 2 centuries and the oppression, that, we have suffered through. So therefore, how can anyone have any empathy or understanding if there's a lack of that awareness? But it does scare me, Norman. I mean, I'm just going to say, I get really pissed off about, this, because I'm like, how is it possible? You're saying, oh, these people live in these areas where there's not a lot of Asians. I don't care about that. Do you not watch the news? Do you not read anything about what's going on in the world? It doesn't have to happen in your backyard.
Yeah. Well, and the way the question's asked, do you think anti-Asian racism is a problem that should be addressed? I mean, how can you say no to that?
How do you say no to that?
It has racism in the question, right? And yet people are still saying, no, I don't think it's a problem, And so a huge amount of education needs to be done.
Well,
sure.
Norman, I mean, the perfect example is when no Republicans voted initially for that proclamation or whatever it was that Grace Meng in New York was trying to get across, of just stating that anti-Asian racism is bad.
No.
But no Republican wanted to vote for that. Finally, it did pass, in Congress, but still, it's truly astounding that, yes, you don't want to be partisan in this, right? You want to just get the information out there and get the facts, but the facts show that clearly there is this strange resistance from the Republicans. And I don't want to be partisan either, but I can't help myself, especially since the last administration inflamed this issue beyond belief. So, we have to acknowledge that. We can't ignore oh no, it's not a partisan thing. Clearly, your data is showing that there's a problem.
There's a clear divide. Yeah. So back to the the myths. The model minority, the perpetual foreigner, yellow peril. There are a few data points that I think are really worth mentioning. And as you said earlier, May, it is shocking after 50 plus years just how prevalent these stereotypes still remain. When we asked people to come up with 3 adjectives to describe Asian Americans, the top 3 were smart, intelligent, hardworking, and kind. Thoughtful, nice, right? Which is the thing I hated to be called the most when I was a kid. And these are in general positive words, but we understand the greater context in which they're provided, right? The model minority myth was used to divide different groups and to put pressure on certain groups versus others. And it also obviously obfuscates kind of the reality of Asian Americans, that we are not monolithic, and many Asians in particular, are struggling right now, especially during COVID. So the model minority myth really is pervasive in our data. Another really telling data point is about when we ask people, do you agree or disagree with the statement that Asian Americans are more loyal to their country of origin than the U.S.? Okay, so this is the idea of, are you more American patriotic, or do you more aligned with countries in Asia? And 20% of Americans believe that Asian Americans are more loyal to their country of origin. And this is just classic perpetual foreigner. This is exactly what the perception was during World War II, right?
Exactly.
When Japanese were incarcerated, because they thought their allegiances lay with Japan.
Right.
And so, again, to see this high level of concern about the patriotism of Asian Americans, I think is really concerning. So, it's, again, something that we identified in our research. The last one I'll mention is about yellow peril. And this is to your earlier point about the last administration, with China virus, Wuhan virus, Kung flu. Still 15% of whites in our survey and 26% of Republicans believe those terms are appropriate, or one of those terms are appropriate for COVID-19. So, there's still a lot of damage that needs to be undone, especially from the last administration. So, but this gives us the data that we can use to start to create action and programs. We can start to measure and track progress. You're a business person. Unless you have data, you cannot track progress.
For sure.
We need to have the data. We're setting benchmarks with this status index. Again, the first such study in over 20 years. And so, we're really looking forward to programs, partnerships, and next year's survey.
Yeah, no, I think that data is essential in trying to determine what the issue is. And then you can build upon that with using that data. And kids out there, you might think data is boring, but it is actually so fascinating once you start looking at, these data points, because it tells you the story. It absolutely tells you the story and the truth, right? You can't argue with data. It's just like science. You can't argue science. Well, Norman, I just think it's fascinating that you guys decided to take it upon yourselves to do this. And I want to thank you for doing that, because again, the fact that there's no survey and no research that has been done in over 20 years to, measure how Asians are viewed. But that is so crucial now more than ever before, to be able to then shape the narrative and then to create that change, that, sort of tangible change that we need to have that better understanding.
Yeah, if I could just in a few minutes, May, just talk about kind of our plans going forward.
Yeah, please.
I think it's really important now that we have the data to use the data effectively. So first and foremost, we are launching a national campaign next week to announce the report. And we've been busy working on the report, and it's almost done, but we'll have it ready, and we'll have it on our website. So number one is to share the data via traditional and social media and platforms like yours that are really prominent and very high quality. We'd love for your help to help spread the message, of course.
For sure.
And we're also building a mini site so that all the data we have, over 100,000 data points, will be accessible and researchable by people. So if there are data people out there who want to better understand the data and go in there and do their own analyses, we will have a mini site that allows people to do that. So it'll be very interactive, really, really cool.
Great.
Number two is we want to collaborate with leading politicians and community organizations. And just last Wednesday, we had the opportunity to present to CAPAC, Congressional Pacific American Caucus. Congressman Ted Lieu was kind enough to invite us to that, and we had a wonderful chance to speak to real leaders of our community in government. So that was wonderful, and we are continuing to collaborate with them. We're also working with other nonprofit organizations, who are involved with data, who are involved in education, who are involved in influencing media, to really get our information to people who are making an impact. And we're developing some of our own programs to change some of these issues that we've identified. And lastly, we are excited about next year doing the survey again. We want to do this on an annual basis so we can track to see how things change over time. Hopefully just think about how much things have changed in the last year, right? Pre and post COVID, about attitudes towards Asian Americans. A lot can happen in 1 year. So we will be doing the survey on an annual basis to see how trends, progress, downturns, everything.
And the survey, you conducted the survey last year, right?
No, it was just done and finished in April. So literally.
Oh my gosh. Okay. For some reason, I thought you were doing it last year.
So this is fresh
off the presses. Oh my God. Okay.
That's why we're working on the report right now. But yeah, we completed the survey. We did the survey primarily over the first 2 weeks of April.
Okay.
It was concluded on April 14th. So literally, 3 weeks ago. And we've been busy analyzing the data, coming up with the report, all into anticipation of Asia Pacific American Heritage Month. So that's why we're going out now.
So that was quite an endeavor, but no, it's good to know that the data is that fresh. So it's that current. Well, it's amazing work that you guys have done, and I'm glad to hear that you're going to do this annually, because I think it's much needed. This kind of information is much needed. I'm certainly going to talk about this data in my shows, but also, again, I speak to so many different groups that are hungry. And the good news is, Norman, it gives me hope. The good news is that I do see a lot more engagement. I see a lot more hunger from private sector and nonprofits, across the board, for more education, more information, to raise awareness. And I really think that this is the moment for us to really strike and seize it, so that we can create this permanent change of better education, better information, better, history lessons, all of that. So this is all, going into that effort. This is a big part of it.
Yeah, no, thanks. And, it's really encouraging, as we talked about earlier, that the youth are motivated, right? Yeah. And they're engaged and they're fed up, right? And they're super savvy on social media. And so they're using all the technology and passion to really drive further change. So we have a lot of our programming and partnerships targeted towards youth and how we can work with them. So
that's great.
Yeah, really exciting, and I think important.
Terrific. One last question I want to ask you personally. How have you been feeling during these times? I'm sure you have kids, right?
Yes.
And obviously you have parents, and I have an 84-year-old mother who I worry about constantly. So tell me your personal feelings about what's been happening.
Two terms for me: outraged and defiant. So, I have parents who are in their 80s. They live in California, and these incidents have been happening all over the place, and it's increased so much stress and anxiety for Asian Americans, and that has really affected mental health during COVID, during all this trauma. And so, you really worry about the toll it's taking on people, especially vulnerable people who are looking over their shoulders when they go outside for their daily walks. So outrage at that, and defiant in that, again, we've been seeing this during our whole lifetime, May, right? And we're kind of tired of it, right? We're kind of saying we need to make a change. We're different from our parents. They just wanted to eke out a survival here,
Yep.
right? We deserve not only safety and health and education, but we deserve to have a prominent role in American society. We've earned it. We've contributed. And so we're defiant. We know of the talent in our community, and we know the great things that we bring to this country.
Yep.
We're not perfect. There are things we need to work on for sure. But, we are part of America, and we are committed to not only battling these terrible attacks against Asian Americans, but also celebrating our culture, right?
Yes.
Doing what our parents told us to do, and that is to be proud of being Asian American. So it's all come full circle, I realize, right? Our parents were right from the very beginning. We just took all to learn.
We didn't want to listen to them when we were young, but yes, they were right. You're absolutely right. But yeah, like you said, with survey, it's like Asians want to be respected, and if we don't feel respected, then that's a problem. So we want respect, and we certainly want to belong because we do.
Yes.
So let's keep fighting this fight and getting this information out and doing what we can. And like you guys have done, individuals coming together because you're saying enough is enough. We're going to try to do something about this. So congratulations on the work that you guys are doing, and keep it up for sure.
Thank you. And thank you for your platform, for all the great work you're doing. I know you've been doing it for a long time as well.
I have, but and we're tired, but you know what? we got to keep going on, right? We got to keep doing what we're doing. So, well, thank you so much, Norman. And let's talk again when we have more information going on, and any efforts that we can all collaborate on. I would be more than willing to take part in that.
And we'll send you the report by next Monday. Hopefully it'll be done.
Please do. Okay.
All right. Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, like I said, data matters. That kind of information matters. And if we can try to raise more awareness, not just within just the AAPI community, but also learn about how other communities perceive us, and then work on breaking those stereotypes and the incorrect narratives that are out there, then we're all going to be better off. So if you want to check out the details of the survey, just go to their website. It's LAAUNCH.org, launch.org. And the survey will be there. You can check out all the data and all the information that they found. And they also have social media. You can follow them there on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. All right. And same goes with the May Lee Show. If you don't follow it yet on social media, we are on Instagram, we're on Twitter, and we're on Facebook. And of course, you can watch the show. If you're watching it right now, then you already know we're on YouTube and on all podcast platforms. Okay. So check us out. And hey, if you have a minute to give us a nice rating on Apple, iTunes, podcasts, please do, because that always helps. If you enjoy the podcast, then let us know. Share that good news. Okay. And that was my dog, Eggy, barking in the background. Do you need to go outside and go to the bathroom? Yeah. Okay. All right. Got to run, guys, because my dog is calling, and she is the queen bee of this household. Okay. All right, everyone. Oh, here she comes. Okay, everyone, have a great rest of your day or evening or whatever time that it is right now where you're listening and watching. Take care of yourself. Stay safe, and let's be in this all together. Okay? Bye, everyone.